Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, we've got Xoaquin Flores, XF, the gardener of Telegram. Florist, right? The florist of Telegram. This is actually the second attempt at this recording. The comedy was so terrible in the first time, we had to stop it 20 minutes in and write some notes. So this, for the first time, is a prepared comedy routine for you guys, because this is a comedy show. XF, you want to say hi? Welcome. Hi.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me on. This is the one episode that we're gonna show people this one trick that will allow them, when they're reading something and words are used, or when they're in a conversation and certain words are used, in particular facts, the word facts, what are the facts, in other words, when people say, you're free to your own opinion, but you're not free to your own facts, right? So
show me the facts. Show me the facts.
Right? Show me the facts. What do the facts mean? And this word gets bandied about, and so often you find, 404 nothing found when you dig into so-called facts. So what the hell do we mean by facts? But more broadly, we wanted to develop this into a talk about Aristotle and Plato, and to understand how there's a potential to unify their ideas in understanding of existence and reality. And but all of existence is, when we say existence or when we say reality, tend to encompass these categories of things that exist and phenomenon which are real. So I've arrived at a novel approach of explaining Aristotle and Plato's ideas, which we're not going to be able to really get to, I don't think. But if you'll have me on in future episodes to talk about it, we'll have slides maybe, or something that will be more clear or elucidative for people. Today, because part of the foundation in this novel approach, I found from very useful ideas of a guy who has a lot of other ideas that I can't vouch for or whatever, but his name is Bill Gaty, and he's a person who logically introduced categorically, for the purpose of theoretical physics, a missing shared problem at the foundation of theoretical physics, in the conflation of real for exist. So to exist and to be real are not the same thing. And like I said, even in your daily life and reading newspapers, or when you're having conversations, interjecting this difference in understanding is not only going to be able to get you to understand, actually see what you're hearing or talking about in a totally different way, that's going to be able to bring clarity to everyone in the conversation. But when you're reading things, same thing. You're like, oh my God, this is totally not how I used to think about how this word gets used. But then more long term, it's going to build the foundation for actually understanding really what Plato is saying on the areas that Aristotle also speaks to on this question. And that's where people really talk about the difference between Aristotle and Plato. And
I have to be a troll. I have to be a troll.
What?
I have to be a troll. Descartes, was it Descartes that said, I think, therefore I am?
Yeah.
So is that real, or is that existing?
Is I think, therefore I am real? Well, he's going about a real process, right, to establish that what he observes as his own existing is a real and correct observation of his existing, leading towards him establishing the fact of his existing. Yeah.
You know what else is an establishable fact? That this channel is demonetized and not eligible for monetization. And I just want to give a shout out to everybody who actually has donated something or bought me a coffee or sent along in other ways support for the show. So yeah, thank you, and moving right along. Whoops, that's the wrong one. There we go. So back to this unified theory of Aristotelian and Platonic understanding of existence.
Yeah, this is something that I'm proposing is relatively easy to understand and for other people to develop on. Once we get past this is like not today, but once we get past the nomenclature and the different dictionaries that they use, and then the different wrong dictionaries that have been used in the past, especially like the minute that you're reading on it or someone is summarizing it as opposed to reading in the original Greek, like people summarizing it will use the words existence or exist and real and reality interchangeably, leading towards a misunderstanding of ousia as substance in Aristotle, and and the distinction from an aspect of essence, and then as distinct from concrete instantiations of the idea, or instantiations of the universal, rather. So,
what are instantiations?
Yeah,
like
that's
instances of existing.
Yeah, instantiations are like, for example, an instantiation is like this episode of The Working Brother, right? But what categorically is The Working Brother? A comedy show. Technically,
theoretically, subjectively.
Yeah, so,
some people would say so. Legally speaking, I think yes, it is a comedy show.
Yeah. So like the way that people understand the difference, like in the basic sense, is that like Plato would say that this episode is like an imperfect version, an imperfect episode, like a less than possibly funny version of like a real existing episode that was perfect.
You mean the episode, the 20 minutes that we didn't record is therefore not, that we recorded but will never be aired, is therefore not live.
Right. But that
therefore
one
doesn't exist.
Not only like perfect, but also singular in existence, so that there's only really one perfect comedy show episode that ever existed on planet Earth. Maybe it'll be on Patreon. Or potentially, hypothetically, there could only be one if there was one. But definitely there's a perfect comedy show like in this other reality. That's like Plato, right? Whereas like Aristotle would say that that the universal comedy show, right, is categorically reality, but the instantiation of it is the limitation of what we can know about it. And anyway, so that's the instantiation of it, is like this particular episode.
I think I get what you're saying. So like the comedy show idea, as like what happens on and off camera and what goes on behind taking care of everything and making it happen, is one thing, but the instantiation is, or instant, how did you pronounce it?
Instantiation. The
instantiation. Yeah. Is the episode format that gets put out that is the technically comedy show.
Yeah, like there's a universal coffee cup, right? Mm-hmm. There's a universal coffee cup, right?
Yeah, and then there's this cup.
But this particular one and that particular one are instantiations of it.
Mm-hmm. So it's like the idea versus the singular existing form of said idea.
Aristotle would say that the other, whatever aspect of the universal that can be non-speculatively talked about would be those aspects of the universal that emanate from the substance or the essence of this particular instantiation of it.
In your case, some really good coffee. This is you're basically giving me like 17 chances to like thank everybody who's bought me a coffee and who's donated. Everybody who has it, check out the link in the description. There's a link there to the Patreon as well, where I might actually post some never posted before scenes that are recorded bloopers of sorts. Also, check out the link to XF's Telegram if you're not already there, which I presume you already are. Now, let's get back to this little table we've got here. To exist versus to be real.
So,
and we've got on the left...
Anyway, so this is perfect to open up as a segue, because as we had been establishing, like the way, if you understood me, what I said about how Aristotle would explain it, you might have heard that, you might have been thinking like, wait a minute, do you mean Plato? Like, do you mean Plato? Like, right? Because you would think that Plato is the one that thinks that there's a universal, and then this is like the, the thing in the world, right? But there's this universal out there, right? So the universal like version of this, right? But so understand that just as Plato was the student of Socrates, Aristotle was the student of Plato, right? So Aristotle, when he's talking about this, right, and when he's talking, the difference that we perceive is actually a difference in a way that he's proposing in epistemology that limits our conclusions about ontological questions to things which are empirical.
I love how you like trail off, expecting me to like come back with something.
I was just like, I mean, that seemed like enough to say, but I mean, in the most direct sense is like, well, it's important to say it that way, but in the direct sense is that there's a misperception about the difference between Plato and Aristotle. Right. And Aristotle's views are not fundamentally necessarily at odds with Plato's. He's developing a way of proposing to investigate subjects, which do not need to simultaneously account for any telos or design or like a intentional process at the level of in the realm of like Plato's realm of forms of thought forms, let's say, or idea or the perfect thing version, right? The perfect version of it in that realm for Plato. The same thing would be like that corresponds to Aristotle's view as well, but the difference is that Aristotle is talking of taking that universal and eliminating that it's a form, and then just saying that the universal is instantiated in the objects that we, or phenomenon that we perceive in the physical world. So that we should limit our exploration. We don't need to like include the additional burden or abstraction of contemplating how processes unfold with regard to like a plan or design of the universe, right? So there,
I
so
I was gonna say, so we've got Aristotelian versus Platonic thought,
yeah,
existence
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and reality. And we've defined.
Yeah.
We need to go through and define these, and let's see if we can, like, this is not scripted at all, but kind of has like some kind of background to
Well,
it.
we wrote these together
But
because the first time we were going to do it in real time, but we like lots of things were obviously, as you guys will see, like we're going to be too wasting your time. So we made this much more like on point for you now. But so this relates to the original promise in this video, which is that you're going to get from this novel way to approach information, conversations, or when people say, well, you know, here's the fact, or the fact of the matter is such and such. So
let's get into what facts are and what reality is, and how one would define them in the Greek sense, right? So
well,
a
English will
fact.
help first. You know, let's leave it. We'll stop with English, but if we can accomplish English, we've done most of our work. So, if because then the Greek is just a direct translation, right? So
Mhm.
the conversationally, okay. Let's establish this, that when you define a word, you can't use a word. You can't use the word in its own definition, right? So that would include the case of existence, of exist and real.
And is. What is the word is? What does is
We're
mean?
defining the problem. We're defining the problem. Okay. So if you go into like a dictionary or even expanded form, encyclopedic form, and you look up the word exist, you're going to find the word real in there. Okay. And when you go look up the word real, you're going to find the word exist. So we should immediately identify that that's a problem. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So now I'm not suggesting any grand conspiracy, but once we divide and properly define each of those words, like, then not only will contemporary information be, you know, shed on you in a different light, and not only will you be able to interject that into conversations in a way that sheds light on what you guys are even talking about or not, ultimately will help you understand really what's going on with Aristotle and Plato and why it's possible to bring a more unified theory of Aristotelian and Platonic conceptions of existence. But that unified theory is a you know, whole other ball of wax.
Should we pop up those definitions for people?
Yeah.
Real, actually existing as a thing, or occurring in fact, not imagined or supposed. All right, so that's real, the definition, and exist. The definition is have objective reality or being. So yeah, that's a very loopy.
Oh, how many people tonight are dealt with this one?
It's a loopy definition. Do you wanna help people understand where we're going? This, like, let's talk about this this talk show, this comedy show, this Working Brother Talks. It is what it is.
Right.
The worst comedy show on YouTube, supposedly.
Right.
People keep telling me the comments is getting better, but I don't believe them. So, does it exist? Is it real?
Both. It's both real and it exists. Yeah. So what exists of this? Well, if you're the person, if you're from the perspective of you, the observer, right? This is a digital file. You could probably, download it from some like YouTube to MP4 thing. You would have it. That would be what exists, in digital format on a hard drive, or it's on YouTube.
In zeros and ones, yeah.
So, right now, that's what exists, right? That's what is observable in the sense of empirical. So for something to exist, it's empirical, right? Meaning that you can like touch it, see it, right? So if it smells like something, you can smell it if you're close enough, things like that. So,
all right. So it's observable by the senses, is what you're getting at, yeah? Like it
observable
exists
by the senses. Yeah, so observable by the senses. Observable by the senses is a very good definition. And so basically, a fact, right? A fact
like
has
a photograph
to be
or this
a
video,
fact, right? Where we screw ourselves up is in the definition of fact. So that's why we're saying this is going to help in your conversations and understanding like what's a fact, what's not a fact, right? So if you pull up the thing, you'll see that the first definition of what does it say?
a fact.
It's a fact, right? And the first definition is empirical, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now that's the only true definition of fact.
So just because people can hear and see this comedy show, it therefore is a fact that this is a comedy show?
Well, I don't know that it's a fact that it's a comedy show. Like Aristotle would say that like you'd have to still observe the instantiation of it and see if it compares to the universal.
Compare it to other comedy shows and see if it's up.
That it's not a comedy show. Okay. But
even the guests laugh from time to time, so it's technically a comedy show. So fact and law, historical fact, convention, consensus, recognition of empirical facts, but also a narrative describing a dynamic process. Do you want to
right. So
localize that for us?
So here's the problem. So here's like a fact this is not a fact, really. Like it involves facts. You see, it can involve facts, but it's not a fact. So if let's say that 4 people are looking at a red ball, right? Well, for those 4 people, that red ball was in the first definition of fact, right? So now those 4 people go and sign sworn testimonies, like, punishable under perjury laws or whatever, by instant death or whatever. And they're highly credible people and they never lied before. And they all sign statements saying that they saw a red ball at such and such time, such and such place, right?
Is this a Daltonist joke? Is this a Daltonist joke?
What?
Is this a Daltonist joke? You know those colorblind people? Is this a colorblind joke?
I didn't know that was a thing, no. Well, I don't even know what we were saying.
You were talking about the red ball and 4 people. And how 4 people can give testimony.
I can barely hear it. So,
red ball.
So 4 people. The 4 people that are there, for them, that's a fact in the first sense, right? Now, their testimony, right, either becomes a fact in the sense of a fact that's admitted to a case, right, or a fact that is in a history book, right? like that type of fact. So a legal and historical fact is not a fact in the sense of the first case.
A legal and historical fact is not a fact in the sense of the first case. So it's not empirical, you're saying.
Right. It's only it's not an empirical fact. It's a hearsay of the empirical fact, let's say.
All right. And then you say that point 3 is not debatable with regard to number 1, as in it's not debatable that it's empirical. So the fact that this
it's ipso facto truth, right? So like 10 people, like all are in the same place, and they're all looking at a blue car, right? That blue car, right? The facticity of the car is ipso facto. It's true in and of itself that it's there. That's the truth, that you see it. You know, you're not hallucinating. Everyone sees it. There's no reason. It's solid. There it is. Like other solid things that you've seen, you'd say that's a fact. You know, it's, in other words, we're ruling out like problems with perception or whatever. We're talking about just the basic, sense perceptions working. The fact
that this file exists as an upload is a fact, irregardless of whether or not 5 people saw it or 10 people saw it or think it's funny.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, back to our little slide, because that'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you want to get to the real? Or
no. So to exist is empirical. Number 2, here's another thing about fact. So I said, it could be like it's a accepted testimony about this, right? So, but another type of legal or historical fact would involve describing dynamic processes that actually get into the definition of real. So, in other words, as we'll see, because real, the reality of things, is there's some intercontingency of human decoding or interpretation of the event that takes place. That's not the same as observing an empirical fact. So, but we'll see how that unfolds.
So wait, now looking at it from the Platonic side of things, we have to define what it means to be real, right?
No, this is not a to exist versus to be real is not an Aristotelian versus Platonic setup.
It's not versus in the traditional sense. I'm saying in like their perspective of things, like their, like how would they look at the same question basically? So
we're looking at the same. We're looking at how ultimately, but not in this show, dude. But ultimately, we're going to see what Aristotle says is to exist and to be real, and what Plato says is to exist and to be real, right? But we basically alluded to it earlier, like in this episode, like when I was describing just how the difference is understood typically. So, but by establishing this dictionary of exist and real, then we're going to be able to apply those definitions in a more universal way in looking at the words that Aristotle and Plato used in describing their areas of thought that overlap, right?
To be more real and practical, we're talking about this comedy show and this episode specifically. Is it real? Is more subjective of a question than is it a fact? As in, does it exist?
Yeah, there's some more subjectivity about its reality in some ways, but and that doesn't lessen its aspects of it which exist, right? But if we just look at the first problem in or the first example rather in the
right column, in the real column, dynamic.
Yeah.
So it has to be dynamic. How would you define dynamic in this sense?
Well, something that exists is something that you can see a photo, right? And something that's real, you'd have to see it like in a movie. So, like if you have a photograph and there's a guy who's falling in the photograph, right? Like your perception that he's falling is actually not visible in the photograph, right? You are imparting a reference to past presumptions for you to make a description about reality in that photograph. So if the guy is falling, like he's making like this, right? He's falling, but hypothetically, he could be posing for the picture to make that pose like he's falling. And he wouldn't really be falling. He would be.
So you're saying this show could be actually not funny, but we're pretending for it to be funny.
Yeah.
And
now you're getting it, man. The suspicions are So.
It's just go on. It's not worth mentioning. It's just a little meme about nihilism. It might be one of the thumbnails.
Yeah.
So is the show funny or not? Does it exist as a comedy show?
Well, that would be like a historical fact. That's a matter of consensus or of opinion. That would be the one that people agree on. But that's like a social and political question.
So being real is dynamic, and under point 2, you've got has an effect on things that exist or describes the interactions of things that exist. So by that sub definition, it's definitely
like
a comedy show.
Like a movie that the guy is falling, right? A movie that the guy is falling, you can see the guy falling, right? But falling, you can't point to falling, right? What does a falling look like? Right?
Time out. You 9/11 and that guy falling from the tower comes to mind. Like when you say there is no falling, that is a falling.
No, that's an instantiation. That's an example of the dynamic, right? That's like almost I don't even know. It's not even instantiation. It involves an instantiation in the Aristotelian sense, but it's a dynamic process. So, in other words, like there's no falling. Like falling is a thing that happens to things, right? Aristotle calls things that are the examples of the universal that are capable, that there's some trajectory that can happen to them, including accidents. He has a category called accidents, which he uses a little bit differently when we think of an accident, but it correlates to Plato's idea that the world that we live in is filled with the imperfect forms or the imperfect versions of the correct form that exists elsewhere. So,
like my building is full of imperfect forms that could exist elsewhere. My neighbor is drilling in the background, so if you're he's doing his weekend dulling of his drill. So if you're hearing noises in the background, I do apologize. But yeah, so this here that we've got are abstract categories such as comedies, apples, governments,
right.
Memes, cognitive processes.
Right, like if I, for example, if I were to say, hey, are governments a fact? And then a person would say, like, yeah, governments are a fact, right? I mean, they're a fact under definition 2, though. You see, so that doesn't really, what we're trying to show there is that definition number 2 doesn't belong in the left-hand column.
Fact and law?
Definition two is going to go in the right-hand column, but we're going to see exactly where in the right-hand column this definition 2 actually should go.
So is this like a preview for a further episode?
No,
or do you want to get into it?
We can do it now. If we work through the reality column or to be real column, then we're gonna see exactly where this false definition of this false concept of fact is actually falls under the other column.
We're hacking debating here. Abstract categories like comedy shows, apples, governments, memes. So comedy shows exist. This is a comedy show. We're done. It's real. It's
real. It's real, but the broader reality of the show extends beyond. When I say this show, it's not just this episode, right?
Exactly. It's what goes on behind the scenes, what happens in post, all the guests, all the innuendos, and then the history
right.
of episodes.
That's part of the reality, right?
That's part of wait, hold on. Yes, that's part of reality, and it also exists. Independent of it being part of reality.
Independent of that, but we've been able to see that actually what exists of it is at what the people actually interact with is a digital thing.
They interact with the existence of it, whereas I deal with the reality of it. It may be exclusively.
Right. But there's also things that exist for you that they're only seeing the movie of in the digital representation. Like your microphone is really there, right? They're interacting with that's a different question in existence as well. But it's transmitted to an informational form, but not unlike like a photograph or something like that. So but when we're saying what is real versus what exists, what exists has location. It has, and it's going to have location, and because it has location, it has mass. So it's going to have some color, some shape, right? So it exists. Maybe it smells like something even, right? It's going to have weight. So something that exists is observable in the sense of you touch it, right? See it. Whereas falling, right? Falling doesn't exist, right? Falling is something that happens to things that exist, but that doesn't mean that it's not real, right? It's not an imagination or something. So falling does not. So falling, there's no such thing as falling. You see what I mean? There's no such thing, not phenomenon. That's why I was like saying that, I don't know, in the outtake or earlier in this one, that phenomenon and thing have to be distinguished from each other. So that phenomenon includes dynamic processes. And dynamic processes involve the interaction of things that exist, but they also involve, and now we can talk about, like in the mind, thoughts but we also understand thoughts in terms of neurons and neural pathways and lipids and cells in the brain. So they exist. Your thoughts exist in the brain in a way more similar to the way that this show exists, that your viewers are going to interact with. But the show that viewers are going to interact with exists differently from how the show or what parts of the show exist for you right now while you're recording. Like the parts of the show that exist for you right now while you're recording are like the physical chair that you're in, the physical body that you occupy, the physical screen board, right? All the technology and things that are physically happening, right? And that you can see not happening, so, that you're interacting with, right?
If like when I muted myself now while you were talking so that I could cough, did that cough exist in reality, or did it is it just there?
Well, the wave form of sound is like a dynamic process, but it's what it denotes. And so you have to have an ear. Like if no one was there to hear the tree fall, it does not make a sound.
That's right? What I was getting at. That's what I was getting at. Like
sound is a different from really truly empirical, in the sense that sound is much more of an auditory hallucination than vision ultimately is a visual hallucination in terms of what creates the image of what we're seeing happens not at the eye but in the brain, right? So it's all taking that information and creating that image, which corresponds to what the world looks like, but also corresponds to the structure of the brain. It's what the world looks like according to the structure of the human brain. What the world looks like fairly corresponds to things that you touch are really there. So there's that part of it, but it's that is a question that is a separate than ultimately the question that we're looking at between Aristotle and Plato, though. But it's good to keep in mind that the brain thoughts are not necessarily like, oh, this is a spirit form or this is like the other realm or something like that. Like definitely thought, like a thought itself, we could reduce to some physical objects in the brain, and then including in that a process that's dynamic interacting between them. So, but thoughts definitely include they include physical objects, but what we call like the emergent theory, but also not necessarily of consciousness. The dynamic interactions of these are synthesizing what we experience as thought, right? So that is that would fall. So our thoughts are reality, right? Our thoughts do not simply exist, right? Thoughts are only possible in a dynamic process, and thoughts in terms of our observations, so like in terms of our empirical observations, even though this is a deduction, so this is more like a historical fact, right, is that for there to be thoughts, there has to be a being that is more than simply thoughts, that's capable of having thoughts, right?
I don't know what I like more, when I cut people off, guests here, and then it triggers the audience, or when I trigger my guest specifically. So here's a random quote that I have no idea where it's from. It just popped up. So no society wants you to become wise. It is against the investment of all societies. If people are wise, they cannot be exploited. Do you have any comment? Keeping in mind today's topic? No, huh?
No,
none whatsoever. All right, let it sit with the audience for a bit. No, seriously speaking though, Here, at the end of this thing, you've got debatable opinions and cognitive process. We've looked through the cognitive process idea with the bear in the woods allegory.
So we're looking to see where actually in left-hand column, the historical or legal fact, where that actually belongs in the right-hand column. So we still have to read through the right-hand column. Now that I think people understand what I'm saying about the difference between these two, unless not, I mean, is it not clear? Like, how would you, in my own, struggled way, summarize my attempt, however botched, to differentiate these?
I think it sums it up when we talk about this as a comedy show. Like, it exists as a video. It is what it is, ipso facto, as you said. Like, it exists in it of itself, existing as a file, however virtual or real that is. I mean, in the
let's say someone were writing a review of your show, right? Like,
why would they be forced to do that?
Because the FBI was paying them. It was their job. They would say that what they're writing about the show, like when they say that there's a show that what he's writing about is the reality, the whole reality of it. Like, in other words, how it impacts people, all these things. For example, let's say you had a cult following, right? And someone who was inspired, right, who had an idea, right, to make a little statue of you, right, like a little figurine of Working Brother.
We're not endorsing this, and careful with where you're going. Otherwise, this is also going to end up like recording that is not for public domain.
Let's
skip the voodoo dolls.
If someone were to make a little a bust of your head or something like that out of honor or whatever, like that would be what, right? That would be. That would exist. That bus would exist.
I don't know.
Well, you do know, because you can test it against what you already learned. Can you touch it? Can you see it?
I couldn't. Like, it would not exist to my knowledge unless they showed me evidence of it existing.
They show it to you.
Well, it would be creepy. That's first of all.
Yeah, it would be creepy as hell. You'd be like, I need a restraining order.
Listen, further than that, I remember one of our older talks, you described yourself as someone who doesn't like to be labeled as a smoker. And I see that you picked up the habit again. Everybody knows that I'm a smoker, so like it's not surprising that I'm here smoking. But you are also smoking again. And you are not a smoker.
No, that's not. You totally misread the.
I know. I'm doing it on purpose. I'm triggering you because you're not like the definition. You don't like being defined as a smoker or non-smoker because smoking is something fluid.
There's nothing on me at all. Whether how people define it. But
I'm saying in the exist to be real. The paradigm here in the Platonic Aristotelian and Platonic understanding of existence, are you a smoker or are you not? Because technically it exists.
Smoking doesn't exist.
But yeah, it does. You're smoking now.
No, it doesn't. No, we already established that smoking doesn't exist. Now it requires two objects. It does require two things that exist, but it's a dynamic process between two things that exist. like
I don't
thinking,
understand.
like consciousness.
I don't
That's what we
understand.
discovered.
How can you say that smoking doesn't exist? We're both doing it.
Because you just said it, we're doing.
Okay, so something that you do cannot exist?
That's right. It involves things that exist, but but the reality is a dynamic process.
Hmm. Cognitive processes.
And
Thoughts,
dynamic
debatable
process.
opinion. I don't know. This episode is really lacking on comedy. It's going to be
Doesn't have to
extremely
go there. I
debatable.
mean, it's like, you know,
It's going to be
I don't
extremely
know.
debatable if this is a comedy show. Also, you should learn to roll your cigarettes better.
Yeah,
For a
mine come out very
non-smoker.
loose. I just don't smoke often enough.
For a non-smoker, your smoking is terrible.
For me, it's about the nicotine.
What can I say, man?
Nicotine and focus.
Everybody, apparently,
Apparently, it
this-
kills my sense of humor, though.
no, apparently it also kills nanobots inside you in the vaccine. I mean, that's something that I think I heard. It could be real. It does exist though. There we go. No, yeah, it's real, but it could exist. It's real, but it could exist. The nicotine actually kills nanobots. So there's that, in case you missed it. You think we covered this foundation to the
No,
unified theory?
I don't think so.
Because we're coming up on the hour. We should round it off.
We wanted to place in the left-hand column where point number 2 actually goes into the right-hand column.
So the fact in law and is in historical fact convention
Yeah, you want to
consensus.
that whole section because we're discovering that this is the takeaway. This is like what people are trying to get from this episode is to understand how the word fact is misunderstood is the most practical thing that they're going to get.
So we've got this fact in law that needs to go into the real and Platonic column, basically.
Yeah, put 2 and actually move that over to where we mentioned subjectivity
And debatable. So it'd be like a 4A.
Yeah, what does 4 say? I don't think you read this to people.
Cognitive processes. You just described it in depth. Thoughts, i.e. the subjective experience, i.e. is something funny or not.
Right.
So 4A would be basically this, right?
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, all of them, including the title.
But I'm specifically avoiding the title because the definition is the same, but historical fact.
I know, but we're removing it from the left-hand column. Now we see it doesn't fit.
Oh, so you're saying it should be totally removed from here?
Yeah.
All right.
Because real includes things that exist.
Real includes things that exist. Well, according to the definition.
Yeah, that's how we're helping to define it.
All right.
But things that exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things that exist have to be distinguished from things that are real. In a way, you could say that of all reality, things that exist comprise the existence part of reality. So this is very different than the problem that we saw when you pulled up the definitions. The correct conventional ones in the sense of conventional, but the point is that you can see the problem in these correct conventional definitions, that we're actually saying that something that exists.
Okay, your net's cracking up. Are you there?
Okay.
Are you back? Yeah. So, yeah, just when you were getting to the conclusion. So you were saying something that exists?
For something to exist, it has to pass the direct empirical test.
So it cannot be a historical fact or a consensus,
you have
basically.
To be able to point. You have to, like, in the conventional sense, you have to be able to point to it. There has to be an it. You know what I mean? Like this exists to me here. Like this exists, right?
But it also exists for people who are watching, in the sense that it's a picture of it existing.
Well, yes. But for then drinking coffee doesn't exist. The coffee exists, and I exist, and the coffee cup exists. But this is a dynamic process that people are inferring.
This is also a dynamic process that people inferred, and they can buy me coffees.
For example, like this goes into the historical record. Like what people get right in this also has aspects of historical record whenever they're observing, whenever they insert their interpretation. Like maybe I had gin in this instead of coffee, right? So then the whole story is different, right? But so the historical record could like not properly reflect the actual true facts, empirical facts from which we extrapolate the narrative, and narratives are part of our description. Narratives are our description of dynamic processes, and all dynamic processes fall under the domain of that which is real or to be real.
So I think I have a perfect closer. I think we've done enough on this. 57 minutes in. Where is it? My statistics. I've got the slide of my statistics. Come on, it was just here. Stats. There we go. Look at this. This is you guys. 2 times more than usual. This is that little break that I took, empirically speaking. Debatable whether it was a break. But yeah. Thank you, everybody who stuck around to the end. Xoaquin, thank you for coming on again, giving us intro to some hacking with definitions and thought. And we'll be back very soon to record some other more pressing topics. Xoaquin, anything you want to outline to people as we roll this out?
Well, you can just see that these two different approaches to understanding fact leads to the biggest, I would say, discrepancy in how people read information or even how people converse. So when people say, like, you can't deny the fact, and then they refer to the legal or historical fact, there may be elements in there that fall actually within reality and thought and interpretation of dynamic processes, that there's room for error there as well. So it's a different type of fact than saying, like, you can't deny the fact that I'm right in front of you. Right, that's a different thing. You can't deny that in 1776 something, right? Like that's like, well, maybe that is debatable. You know what I mean? I mean, we're not standing in front of, that event right now. So it gets down to the historical record and things like that. So yeah.
You can't deny the fact that this was a funny episode. And if you find that true, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Xoaquin will be right back. Everyone, see you soon.